Sign the house to us, or we'll cut you off. That's what my son said, and my daughter nodded. It was a Friday evening, and I'd baked chicken with rosemary, just like they liked it when they were little. We were at my table, the same oak table Tom and I had picked out 40 years ago. And that's the sentence Alex chose to say while he passed the peas. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sound angry. He said it like it was business, like I should have expected it. Joan added, "We're not trying to be mean, Mom. We just think it's time. You're 75. The house is too big. It would be better if you put it in our names now. Avoid all the mess later." She took a sip of her wine after she said it, as if we'd just finished discussing weather. I sat there in silence, my hands folded in my lap. I looked at the two people I had carried in my body, fed, clothed, sat up with through fevers and heartbreaks, and I felt something harden inside me. Not rage, not grief, not yet. Just a kind of stillness. Alex went on. "We've talked about this, Joan and I. It's not safe for you to be alone in a house this size. And we've both helped you so much over the years. This would just be fair. Fair." That word, of all words, nearly made me laugh. Joan said, "We're not saying you have to move out now. We're just asking you to make it official, for peace of mind." "For whose peace of mind?" I asked. They didn't answer. I had spent the last decade of my life being everyone's safety net. I helped pay for their kids' school fees. I gave Joan money for braces when her husband lost his job. I let Alex and his family live here for 6 months when they were in between apartments. I babysat, cooked, ran errands, remembered birthdays. But now it was about the house. My house. The house Tom built. I looked down at my plate. My chicken had gone cold. I pushed it aside. "I'll think about it," I said. That seemed to satisfy them. Joan smiled and said she'd send over the documents. Alex kissed me on the cheek before he left, like nothing had happened. When the door closed behind them, the house fell quiet again. The kind of quiet that feels like judgment. I sat back down and looked around my kitchen. The wallpaper Tom and I had picked out in '88, faded now but still holding on. The small ceramic chicken on the windowsill, a silly gift from Joan when she was 10. The notepad on the fridge with my grocery list, next to a photo of me and Tom at the beach. The whole house was full of us. I poured myself a cup of tea I didn't want and sat in Tom's old chair. I imagined what he'd say. I didn't have to imagine hard. He'd say, "Don't let them bully you, May." And I'd say, "They're our children." And he'd say, "Children or not, you don't owe them your spine." That was the thing about Tom. He saw things plainly. He didn't wrap truth in pleasantries. He loved our kids, fiercely. But he believed in boundaries. He used to say, "We raise them to be strong, not entitled." Maybe somewhere along the way, I forgot that part. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed listening to the house creak and sigh around me. Every sound was familiar. Nothing in this house had ever frightened me before. But that night, I felt like something was pressing in from the walls. Not fear, but something colder. Like erasure. I got up at 4 in the morning and made oatmeal. By 7, I'd made a decision. I would sign something, yes, but not what they thought. When Tom died, Joan had asked me if I planned to sell the house. "You could move closer to us," she said, holding my hand at the funeral. "Somewhere smaller, easier. We could help." But I knew what Tom would have said, even then. He'd say, "Don't make decisions with tears in your eyes." So I stayed. I stayed in the house we built from scratch in 1973, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. Tom worked nights as a mechanic, and I took shifts at the bakery until my ankles swelled. We laid the foundation ourselves one spring, and I remember Tom looking at the plot with his hands on his hips, saying, "We'll raise our kids here, and we'll grow old here. And when we're too old to stand, we'll sit on that porch and watch the mailman go by." And we did, mostly, except the sitting part. He didn't live long enough for that. In the years after his death, I filled the house with busyness. I quilted. I volunteered. I watched the grandkids when their schools had teacher training days. I cooked dinners for Joan's friends. I let Alex use the garage when he needed space to start a side hustle. That lasted 3 months and left a grease stain I never did get out. There wasn't a single room in this house that didn't hold someone else's mess. And I cleaned it all, smiling. But something had shifted lately, subtle at first. Joan's visits became shorter. Alex's tone turned brisk. Questions turned into instructions. Then came that dinner and the request, no, demand, to sign the house away, as if it was just property, as if it wasn't the place I nursed them through chickenpox, the floor they learned to walk on, the bathtub where I scrubbed dirt from their summer knees. I spent the weekend going through my desk drawer, the one where I kept important things. I found every birthday card they'd ever given me, until they stopped. I found receipts from every wire transfer I'd made, just to help for now. I found a sticky note Tom had left me once. "Don't forget to take care of yourself, too." I hadn't. Not for years. By Sunday evening, Joan sent me a text. "Mom, did you look over the draft yet? I can have the notary come by this week." I replied, "Soon. Need to tidy some things first?" She sent back a thumbs-up emoji. I stared at it for a long time. That night, I took out the spare key to the locked cabinet and pulled out our original deed. I placed it on the kitchen table next to their draft copy. I read both carefully. Theirs was tidy, legal, cold. The original still had the smudge of Tom's thumbprint where he'd pressed too hard. On Monday morning, I put on my best trousers and took the bus downtown. I walked into the office of Whitman and Lowe, the law firm Tom and I had used when we first wrote our wills. I asked to see Richard Lowe. He was older now, white-haired and thinner, but his eyes still lit up when he saw me. "Mrs. Delaney, it's been a long time. I need to change my will," I said, "and I need to make a transfer." "To your children?" I shook my head. "To charity." He raised his eyebrows but didn't ask why. That's what I appreciated about Richard. "Any particular organization?" "Yes," I said. "One I've volunteered with for 10 years. They house single mothers. Help them get back on their feet." I remembered the last girl I'd helped. Tanya, 19, kicked out by her parents, pregnant, scared to death. She'd held her baby in that shelter, with the same shaking hands I'd once held Joan with. Tanya had sent me a Christmas card last year. Joan hadn't. "I want the house to go to them," I said. Richard leaned back in his chair. "You're sure about this?" I nodded. "They said they'd cut me off if I didn't give it to them," I added quietly. He was silent for a moment. "Then it sounds like you're making the right choice." It took 4 hours to sort through the documents. Richard walked me through every page. What would transfer? What would remain? What clauses to include in case of contestation? I listened carefully, asked questions when I didn't understand, and initialed every margin like he told me to. By the time we were done, my hand ached, but for the first time in years my spine didn't. He slid the final document toward me. All right, May. One last signature, and the house goes to the Foundation for Women in Crisis. The transfer takes effect in 30 days. I held the pen for a second before signing. Then I said, "Can we put a clause that lets me live in it until I pass? I don't want to be a burden to the charity." Richard nodded. "We call that a retained life estate. You'll have full rights to live there until your passing. No one can force you out." "Good," I said, "because I'm not going anywhere." He smiled gently. "You're sure you don't want to inform your children?" "I'll inform them," I said. "Eventually." When I stepped outside, the wind had picked up. My cardigan flapped behind me as I walked toward the bus stop, clutching the manila folder like it held treasure. In a way, it did. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done that day. Not yet. That evening, Alex called. I could hear the tapping of a keyboard in the background. "Hey, Mom. Joan said you're dragging your feet with the paperwork. What's the holdup?" "I told her I needed time," I said. "Right. But we really want to get everything done this week. It's for tax purposes." There it was. Not safety, not concern. Taxes. "I'll have it ready soon," I said calmly. "We're just thinking ahead," he added, softening his tone. "And this is better for everyone." "Of course," I said. "I understand completely." He hung up satisfied, never noticing I hadn't said what I would sign, just that I'd sign something. After dinner, I sat at my kitchen table and began writing a list. Not a shopping list. Not chores. A reckoning. $4,500. Braces for Joan's daughter when insurance didn't cover the second phase. $2,000. Alex's bridge loan when his contractor skipped town. $600. Emergency plumber when Joan's basement flooded, even though she never paid me back. Dozens of babysitting hours. Dozens of rides to airport terminals, music recitals, dentist appointments. Not once had I been asked what I needed. Not once had anyone asked if I was lonely. The next day, Joan showed up unannounced. She didn't ring the bell, just let herself in with the spare key I'd never asked her to return. "Hey, Mom," she said, setting a stack of folders on the counter. "I thought I'd bring the documents over myself. Save you the trouble." I poured her a cup of tea. Earl Grey, her favorite. She didn't notice I used the chipped mug instead of the one I usually saved for guests. "You haven't even looked at them, have you?" she said with a tight smile. "I have," I lied. "Well, let's go over them now." I nodded and let her talk. She walked me through each clause, explaining like she was talking to someone much older, much slower. "You'll still live here, of course," she said brightly. "We're not pushing you out. That's not what this is." "No, of course not," I murmured. She reached for my hand. "We just want to make sure everything's in place. If something were to happen." Her words trailed off, but her eyes said it all. "You're temporary. This house, however, this they wanted to keep." "I'll sign them soon," I said, gently pulling my hand away. "Just need to clear my head." Joan looked at me, almost suspiciously. "You're not going to change your mind, are you?" I smiled. I already made it. She left after finishing her tea, convinced I was cooperating. I stood at the window after she drove away, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Tom and I used to sit on the porch, counting them like stars. He'd say, "Every light is a life, May. Some shine brighter, but all of them matter." That night, I pulled out the signed papers from Richard's envelope. I stared at my name on the bottom line. The stroke of my pen looked steadier than I felt. But it was done. I wasn't giving the house away. I was giving it back to the world. Thursday morning, I put on my walking shoes, the sturdy ones with the thick soles, and took the number 12 bus toward Jefferson Avenue. The foundation's office was on the second floor of an old brick building above a hardware store. I'd been there many times over the years, always with a basket of muffins or a donation envelope in my coat pocket. But this visit was different. I climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. My knees weren't what they used to be. The hallway smelled like paint and lemon disinfectant. The door was already open. A young woman in a navy blouse looked up from the reception desk. "Good morning. Can I help you?" I smiled. "Yes, dear. I'm here to see Catherine Miller. Tell her May Delaney stopped by." She blinked, then smiled back like she recognized the name. "I'll let her know right away." A few minutes later, Catherine appeared. Tall, mid-40s, her silver-streaked bun a little looser than usual, clipboard in hand as always. "May," she said, enveloping me in a hug. "It's been too long." She led me to her office, past the rows of desks and humming computers. On the wall hung a gallery of framed photos. Women holding babies, standing in newly painted kitchens, smiling with keys in their hands. It was the wall of lives restarted. I pointed to one photo, a girl in a yellow cardigan holding a toddler. "Is that Tanya?" Catherine nodded. "She just finished her associate degree. She's applying to nursing school." I smiled, felt something tug at my throat. "She was 19, I said softly. "Same age Joan was when she got her first car. I bought it for her after her father passed." Catherine didn't ask why I'd come. She just waited. I reached into my bag and took out the folder. "This is a transfer of title," I said. "My home. After I pass, it'll go to your foundation." She opened the folder slowly, her brows pulling together as she read the top sheet. When she looked up, her face was careful. "May, are you sure?" "As sure as I've ever been about anything." Catherine closed the folder, then held it to her chest like it was fragile. "You know I can't tell you what to do, but I want to make sure no one's pressuring you. Not your family, not anyone." I almost laughed. "No, dear, quite the opposite." She didn't press further, just nodded with a kind of quiet respect. "I'll make sure it's used well," she said, "when the time comes. That's all I want." We spent the next hour going over logistics. I wanted to specify that the house couldn't be sold. I wanted it to be used as shelter, real shelter, for women like Tanya. A place to sleep without fear, to eat warm food, to remember they mattered. By the time I left, the receptionist had stepped out, and the hallway was silent. Catherine walked me to the stairs. "If there's ever anything you need, I'll ask," I promised. "But for now, I just need to keep my head down and play along." She raised an eyebrow. "My kids think I'm handing it to them. Let them think so. It's easier than explaining the truth." Catherine nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then I won't say a word." We hugged goodbye, and I descended the stairs, one hand on the rail, the folder now a little lighter in my bag, as if it had done what it came to do. On the way home, I stopped at Murphy's Market. I bought a half-dozen eggs, 2 apples, a box of chamomile tea, and a pie crust. I was in the mood to bake. The next day, Joan texted again. "Any news? We want to schedule with the lawyer." I wrote back, "I've made my arrangements." That afternoon, Alex called. I didn't pick up. I was busy rolling out dough. On Sunday, I was mending a loose hem on my skirt when the knock came. Not the polite kind. Sharp, quick, almost impatient. I set down my needle and thread, smoothed my hands on my lap, and opened the door. Alex stood there in a pressed shirt, holding a thick envelope. "Hey, Mom, mind if I come in?" He didn't wait for an answer. He brushed past me into the kitchen, laid the envelope on the table, and slid it toward me like a dealer pushing cards. "Here," he said. "It's the official paperwork. We went ahead and had it drafted properly. All you have to do is sign, and we'll take care of the rest." I didn't touch it. Instead, I put on the kettle. "Tea?" "No, thanks," he said, restless. He pulled out a chair, sat, and leaned forward, with both elbows on the table. "Mom, I know you're dragging your feet. Joan told me you keep saying you'll get to it. But this really can't wait. There are deadlines. Tax advantages we'll miss if it isn't filed soon." "Deadlines," I echoed, pouring hot water over the tea leaves. "Yes, you don't understand how complicated this stuff can get. Probate, estate tax, it's a mess. We're trying to protect you. Protect me." I stirred my tea slowly, letting the words sink like sugar at the bottom of a cup. "Alex," I said, "do you remember the summer you were 14 and wanted a new bike? The red one from Miller's shop?" He blinked. "What does that have to do with—" "You begged every day until I finally saved enough tips from the bakery. And when I brought it home, you hugged me so tight you knocked my glasses crooked. Do you remember that?" He shifted in his seat. "I guess. A long time ago." "Not so long for me," I said. "I can still hear the bell you rang as you rode up and down the block. You said you'd never forget what I did for you." "Mom, this isn't about bikes," he said, his voice sharpening. "This is about being practical." I nodded. "Yes, practical." I reached for the envelope at last, opened the flap, and slid out the papers. Heavy legal sheets, neat black type, blank lines for my name. The title of the document stared back at me. Transfer of deed. I pretended to read it closely. Really, I just looked at my son's face. He was fidgeting with his wedding ring, avoiding my eyes. "You and Joan both agreed this was best?" I asked. "Of course," he said quickly. "We talked it through. It's the only responsible move." Responsible. I laid the papers flat on the table, then set my teacup right on top of them, leaving a faint, damp ring. "I'll look it over," I said. Alex frowned. "Look it over? There's nothing to look at. Just sign. It's standard." "Nothing is standard when it comes to family," I said softly. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally stood. "Fine. But don't take too long. Joan and I are doing all this for you. Don't make us regret it." I walked him to the door. He kissed my cheek mechanically, like a man shaking hands at a business meeting. When the door shut, I carried the envelope back to my desk. I placed it right beside Richard's manila folder. One set of papers would hand my house to my children. The other would hand it to strangers who actually needed it. The difference between them was simple: gratitude. I left Alex's papers untouched. That night, Joan called. "Mom, Alex said he dropped everything off. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. You're not thinking clearly. At your age—" "At my age," I interrupted, "I've earned the right to think however I please." Silence. Then a sigh. "You're going to do this, right? You're not considering anything else?" "I already made my decision," I said. I could almost hear her relief. "Good, good. You'll see. It's for the best." After she hung up, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. My eyes drifted over the photographs on the mantel. Alex at graduation, Joan on her wedding day, the grandkids at Christmas. Smiling, all of them, their arms around me. I wondered if they remembered those moments the way I did, or if they remembered them at all. I folded my hands, closed my eyes, and whispered to Tom, "Don't worry. They think I'm giving it away. And I am. Just not to them." On Wednesday afternoon, I baked an apple pie. The crust browned nicely, the cinnamon filled the kitchen, and for a moment, I almost forgot about the papers waiting on my desk. Almost. At 4 o'clock, I carried the pie in a basket and walked the 3 blocks to the Foundation's community house. I'd been there dozens of times before, tutoring, baking, sometimes just listening. But that day, I wanted to see the place differently, to imagine my home becoming part of it. The front door was propped open. Kids' voices floated out, high and uneven. Inside, the smell was warm and crowded, a mixture of crayons, shampoo, and laundry detergent. A little boy barreled past me, clutching a toy truck. A young woman chased after him, her hair falling from a messy bun. She stopped short when she saw me. "Sorry," she said, catching her breath. "He's fast." "No harm done," I said, smiling. "I was just dropping this off." I lifted the pie. Her eyes widened. "Real pie?" "As real as it gets." She laughed and led me to the kitchen, where 3 other women were folding laundry on the table. Their conversation stopped as I walked in. They looked at me cautiously at first, then softened when they saw the pie. "This is May," the young woman said quickly. "She volunteers sometimes." I recognized one of them, Angela, who had arrived 6 months earlier with a black eye and a baby girl. She gave me a small nod. We cut the pie and passed plates around. For a few minutes, it was just the sound of forks scraping and soft sighs of appreciation. Then Angela said, quietly, "They told us this place used to be a doctor's office. It feels strange sometimes, living in a building that wasn't meant for us." Her words struck me. I looked around at the narrow hallways, the peeling paint, the 2 small rooms crammed with bunk beds. It wasn't meant for them, no. It was a leftover space. "You deserve better," I said, without thinking. Angela shrugged. "We deserve safe, that's all." I went very still. In my head, I heard Alex saying, "Tax advantages," Joan saying, "At your age." And here was Angela, just asking for safe. I placed my fork down and folded my napkin. "That house of mine," I said slowly. "It has 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garden. It was built to be lived in. To be safe." They looked at me curiously, not yet understanding. I smiled. "One day, it will be yours. Not just a place to sleep, but a place to be." Angela's eyes widened, then filled. "Are you serious?" "As serious as I've ever been." No one said anything for a long time. The pie cooled on the counter. A child's laugh echoed from the hallway. I could feel something steadying in my chest, like a stone clicking into place. Later that evening, when I walked home, I passed Joan's SUV parked in front of my house. She was sitting inside, scrolling on her phone. When she saw me, she got out quickly. "Mom, there you are. I was just about to come in." She fell into step beside me as I unlocked the door. "I don't want to nag," she began, "but Alex said you didn't look at the final version yet. We need to keep things moving." I hung up my coat, carried the empty basket to the kitchen, and washed my hands before answering. "I'll handle it," I said. Joan sighed, following me. "You say that, but you keep delaying. Do you understand how important this is? If you don't do it now, you could lose everything to probate fees. Then we'd all be stuck. I turned to face her. We'd be stuck? She hesitated, then covered it with a laugh. You know what I mean. I set the basket down with more force than I intended. Joan, I said softly, I know exactly what you mean. Her face shifted, just a flicker, quick but unmistakable. She wasn't talking about my safety. She was talking about her security. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock above the stove. Finally, I said, Leave the papers. I'll take care of them soon. She nodded stiffly and left without another word. When the door closed behind her, I leaned against the counter, my hands trembling, not from fear, not even from anger, from clarity. I thought of Angela, of her small daughter tugging at her sleeve while she ate the pie, of the way she had said, We deserve safe. And I knew. My children wanted ownership. But those women needed shelter. One asks for advantage. The other asks for safety. There was no contest. The phone rang at 8 the next morning. I was still in my robe sipping weak coffee. It was Joan. Her voice was bright, too bright. Mom, can I stop by later today, just to chat? I knew that tone. She only used it when she wanted something unpleasant softened. Of course, I said. By noon, she arrived, carrying a paper bag from the bakery. Croissants, my favorite, though she never remembered that until she needed leverage. She placed them on the table like a peace offering. Mom, she began, sliding into the chair across from me, I want to talk woman to woman, not as your daughter, just as another adult. I nodded, waiting. She reached for my hand. I know Alex can come off a little blunt sometimes, but what we're asking, it's not greed, it's love. We just want to make sure you're secure and the house is protected for the family, for the grandkids. For the family, I echoed. Yes, she said quickly, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. No bills, no maintenance headaches. We'll handle it all. You could just relax. Her thumbs stroked the back of my hand, as if coaxing a child. Joan, I said slowly, when was the last time you called me without needing something? She froze, hand tightening before she pulled it away. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe not, I said. But it's true. She pressed her lips together, color rising in her cheeks. Mom, don't twist this. We're trying to do right by you. Don't make it ugly. I stared at her. My daughter, 50 years old, still using the same tactic she'd used at 15. Guilt as a weapon. Joan, I said softly, your father used to tell me I was too generous. He said one day you kids would take advantage without even realizing it. Her eyes sharpened. We're not taking advantage. You raised us better than that. Did I? The silence between us stretched. Finally, she snapped. You know what? If you don't trust us, then maybe we should step back. Maybe we should stop trying so hard. Alex and I don't need this, Mom. We're doing it for you. I felt something inside me go cold and steady. No, I said. You're doing it for yourselves. Her chair scraped back. This is unbelievable. I bring you breakfast, I sit here trying to reason with you, and you accuse me of being selfish? You brought croissants, I said, my voice level. Not love. Her mouth fell open. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Instead, she stood, grabbed her bag, and marched to the door. Fine, she said, turning back once. But don't come running to us when something goes wrong. Don't expect us to bail you out anymore. Then she was gone, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I sat in the quiet kitchen, the smell of buttery pastries still hanging in the air. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't defended myself with long explanations. I had just told the truth, and it had landed like a knife. I looked at the bag of croissants, untouched. I carried them to the counter and opened the back door. A pair of sparrows darted down from the maple tree, pecking eagerly at the pieces I scattered on the step. Better they eat than me. When I came back in, the phone was already buzzing with a new message from Joan. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get upset. But please, don't make decisions you'll regret. We're your children. We know what's best for you." I deleted the message without replying. That evening, I wrote another note in my reckoning book. Croissants, $7.95. Dignity, priceless. Friday morning I woke before dawn, the house still wrapped in silence. I brewed tea, stronger than usual, and laid both sets of papers on the kitchen table. On the left, the manila folder from Richard Lowe, stamped and notarized, with my signature already at the bottom. On the right, the envelope Alex had left, blank lines waiting for me. 2 futures, side by side. I stared at them while the tea went cold. For the first time, I felt the tremor of doubt. Not about what I had done, I knew my choice was right, but about what would come after. What storm would break when they realized? Would they ever forgive me? Did I even want them to? At 10, I put on my coat and walked downtown to the bank. The young teller smiled too brightly, her nails painted lavender. "I need to update my files," I said, sliding over the notarized documents, "and revoke 2 standing authorizations my children have on my accounts." Her smile faltered. "Of course, ma'am. Do you have identification?" I handed her my license. She typed for a long time, frowning occasionally at the screen. Finally, she said, "All right, Mrs. Delaney. Their access is suspended. They'll receive notification by mail." "Good," I said. "Thank you." As I walked out, my hands shook. Not from age, not from weakness, but from the strange thrill of taking back something that had always been mine. That afternoon, I received 3 calls from Alex. I let them ring out. By evening, Joan texted, "Mom, why did the bank say we're locked out? Did you do something?" I set the phone face down and went back to my knitting. The next day, the mail arrived with a letter from Richard confirming the transfer had been filed. I sat in my armchair, unfolded the crisp paper, and read the words twice. The property at 47 Maple Lane is now legally designated to transfer to the Foundation for Women in Crisis upon your passing, with life estate retained by you. Final, binding, irreversible. I felt a rush of calm, like a deep exhale after years of shallow breathing. But calm never lasts long in a house with children circling. That evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Alex standing there, jaw tight, eyes sharp. "Why did the bank call me?" he demanded. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway. "They said I don't have access anymore. Joan either. Did you revoke it?" "Yes," I said simply. His face darkened. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" "Protecting myself," I said. "You don't need protection from us." His voice rose. "We're your family. We're supposed to look out for you." I met his eyes steadily. "Then why do I feel safer now than I did yesterday?" For a moment he had no words, just the sound of his breath, heavy and angry. Finally, he said, "Joan was right. You're not thinking straight. At your age—" "At my age," I interrupted, I've learned the difference between concern and control. His mouth opened, then shut. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not a frail old woman, but an immovable object. "Mom," he said finally, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "Don't do this. Don't push us away. We're trying to make things easier." Easier for whom? Silence again. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving him on the porch. Inside, I leaned against the wood, my heart pounding. Not with fear, but with certainty. I went back to the table and wrote another entry in my reckoning book. Revoked authorizations. 2. Returned power. 1. Then I underlined it twice. That night, I dreamed of Tom. He was standing in the garden, hands on his hips, grinning like he used to. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. When I woke, the house felt lighter. But I knew the storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering. Sunday afternoon, the phone rang again. This time, when I glanced at the screen, it wasn't Joan. It was Alex. For a moment, I considered letting it buzz itself into silence. But something told me I needed to hear what he had to say. "Mom," he said as soon as I answered, his tone gentler than I expected. No bark, no edge. Just soft. "Can I come over? Alone?" "Yes," I said. He arrived half an hour later, without his wife, without the envelope, without the usual tension in his shoulders. He sat at the kitchen table like he had when he was a boy, tracing the edge of a placemat with his finger. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," he began. "Joan can be pushy, I know that. And maybe I didn't phrase things right either. But you know we love you. That hasn't changed." I poured him a cup of tea without asking. He took it, sipped, and kept talking. "We're just worried about you, Mom. The house, the money, all of it. It's a lot to manage. You shouldn't have to deal with all that stress at your age. We just want to help." I watched him carefully. He wasn't angry this time. He was playing another card, the reasonable son, the protector. "Alex," I said, "do you remember the winter your furnace went out? Who paid for the new one?" He blinked. "You did, but that was years ago. And the semester you couldn't afford tuition?" His jaw worked. "You did? But Mom. And who sat with your daughter when she had pneumonia so you and Lisa wouldn't miss work?" His voice dropped. "You did." I set my cup down. "So tell me again, who is taking care of whom?" He stared at the table. For a long moment, I thought he might actually see it. The decades of giving, the balance sheet of motherhood. But then he lifted his eyes, and I saw the same calculation there that had been in Joan's. "Mom," he said softly, "we're not your enemies. We're your children. This isn't about what you've done for us. It's about making sure you don't mess things up now. Don't let strangers take advantage." Strangers. That's what he would call the women at the foundation. Strangers, as if gratitude and respect made less family than shared blood. I folded my hands. "No one's taking advantage of me, Alex. Not anymore." His mouth tightened. "So you really are doing something? With the accounts? With the house?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He leaned forward, voice low. "Please, Mom. Don't go down this road. Don't make choices you can't undo. If you give everything away, what will you have left?" I looked him in the eye. My dignity. His face flushed. He pushed his chair back hard enough to scrape the floor. "Joan said you were being impossible. I didn't believe her. But now—" He shook his head. "You're not the same Mom we knew." I stood too, steady despite the tremor in my knees. You're right, I'm not. I finally remembered who I am. For a moment, his face cracked. Not anger, not calculation. Just something raw. A flicker of hurt, maybe. Then it was gone, replaced by a mask. Fine, he said. Do what you want. But don't expect us to pick up the pieces when it all falls apart. He left without finishing his tea. The house settled back into silence. I walked to my desk, opened my reckoning book, and added a line. Son's promises, empty. Son's threats, empty. My resolve, full. I closed the book and laid my hand on it, the way Tom used to lay his hand on mine in church. Steadying, reassuring. The storm was close now. I could feel it in the air, thick and electric. But storms don't scare me anymore. The following Thursday, I dressed with unusual care. Navy skirt, pressed blouse, the pearl necklace Tom had given me for our 25th anniversary. I tied my gray hair in a neat bun and slipped Richard's folder into my handbag. The morning sun was sharp, the air brisk. It felt like a day meant for decisions. At 10 o'clock, I sat once again in Richard Lowe's office. His secretary offered me coffee, which I declined. My heart was already awake. Richard laid the papers out carefully, smoothing the edges. Everything is in order, May. All that remains is your signature on this final affidavit. I nodded, uncapped the pen, and signed my name with a firm, steady hand. There, I said. Done. Richard gathered the pages, tapped them into a neat stack, and slipped them into a folder stamped with the foundation's name. It's official now. The house remains yours for life. After that, it belongs to the women. A wave of calm washed over me. No hesitation, no guilt. Just calm. Thank you, I said. Richard looked at me over his glasses. You know your children may contest this. They'll try, I said. But they can't undo what's already sealed. He nodded. Do you want me to notify them formally? Not yet, I said. Let them live in their illusion a little longer. On the way home, I stopped at the park. I sat on a bench beneath the old oak tree and watched the children run in circles. Their laughter carried across the field. I closed my eyes and listened, remembering Alex at 6, Joan at 8, shrieking with joy as Tom pushed them on the swings. Back then, they thought the world was safe because I made it so. I opened my eyes to the present, the swings still creaking, different children laughing, and me, 75, free in a way I hadn't been in decades. When I reached home, I put the kettle on. I set Richard's receipt letter in the top drawer of my desk and closed it with a satisfying click. A knock came just as the kettle began to whistle. It was Joan, standing stiffly on the porch. Hi, Mom, she said, forcing a smile. Mind if I come in? I let her in, poured her a cup of tea. She didn't drink it. She slid another envelope across the table. This is the final draft, she said. All you have to do is sign. We'll get it filed next week. I rested my hand on the envelope, pressing it flat against the wood. I'll take a look, I said. She leaned forward. Mom, you need to sign this. Don't drag your feet. We're only thinking of you. Her voice had that same edge, the mixture of insistence and scolding I'd once tolerated, but not anymore. I smiled. Thank you, Joan. I'll keep that in mind. She frowned, studying my face. Perhaps she sensed something different in me. Not defiance, not even anger, just finality. She stood abruptly, gathered her coat, and left without another word. I carried the untouched envelope to the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, curling the edges, blackening the type. In a minute, it was nothing but ash. Later that evening, I wrote in my reckoning book, official transfer, complete. Their draft, Ash. My choice, freedom. I set the pen down and closed the book. My hands were steady. My breath was steady. My life, for the first time in years, was steady. I whispered into the quiet room, "It's done, Tom. Truly done." And the house, our house, seemed to exhale with me. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No envelopes slipped under my door. No phone calls demanding explanations. No footsteps on the porch. For the first time in years, I woke each morning without that coil of dread in my chest. I made oatmeal. I watered the garden. I read the paper all the way through without checking the phone every few minutes. Silence had its own taste. Light, clean, almost sweet. On Tuesday, I walked to the library and checked out a stack of novels I'd been meaning to read someday. Someday had finally come. I sat in the sunlit corner of my living room and lost myself in stories that had nothing to do with signatures, deeds, or family squabbles. When evening fell, I cooked a small dinner. Nothing fancy, just vegetable soup and bread, and ate it slowly at the kitchen table. The house was still, but not lonely. I could almost feel Tom's presence in the chair across from me, smiling at my piece. On Wednesday, I bought a bouquet of tulips for myself. Not because anyone was coming over, not because there was a holiday, but because I wanted them. I placed them on the mantel beneath the family photos. The colors seemed to glow brighter than they ever had. On Thursday, I sat with my reckoning book, turning the pages slowly. Rows of entries stared back at me. Debts, gifts, sacrifices, moments when I'd bent myself out of shape to make life easier for others. It read less like a ledger and more like a confession. I drew a line across the last page. Underneath, I wrote, "Cycle broken." Then I closed the book and set it high on the shelf, out of reach. For 3 whole days, I lived like that. Quietly, steadily, with a sense of lightness that felt almost unreal. I knew it wouldn't last. I knew the storm was still waiting. But in those brief days, I let myself breathe. On Friday afternoon, I took a walk to the corner cafe. The barista, a young man with bright eyes, greeted me warmly. "Same as usual, Mrs. Delaney." "Yes," I said, "but add a slice of carrot cake. For here." I sat by the window with my tea and cake, watching the world pass by. Families bustled with shopping bags. Teenagers laughed too loudly. A mother coaxed her toddler across the street. Ordinary life. I was part of it, not just someone orbiting around her children's demands. As I ate, I thought about how many years had slipped away unnoticed. All the little things I'd denied myself because I was too busy meeting everyone else's needs. And now, at 75, I was finally learning to take small joys seriously. That night, the phone rang again. I looked at the screen. Joan, then Alex, then Joan again. I didn't answer. I went to bed early, the house dark and peaceful. But at 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. Another call, another message. I picked it up, glanced at the screen, and saw one line flashing. "Mom, we need to talk. Urgently." I set the phone back down without replying. I rolled over, pulled the blanket to my chin, and whispered into the quiet room, "Not tonight." For the first time in years, I fell back asleep easily. The silence was mine now. Saturday morning, I woke with a thought I hadn't had in years. What if today was just for me? Not for Joan, not for Alex, not for the grandkids, not for errands or favors or obligations. For me. I pulled open the top drawer of my dresser and found the envelope of cash I'd been keeping for emergencies. Normally, emergencies meant someone else's leaky roof or overdue bill. But today, I decided, the emergency was my own neglected joy. I counted out $200, slipped it into my purse, and put on my walking shoes. The air outside was cool, crisp with the smell of early spring. I walked downtown slowly, savoring the feeling of not rushing anywhere, not being summoned by anyone. My first stop was the little boutique on Jefferson Avenue. For years I'd passed it, telling myself, too frivolous, too expensive. Today I pushed open the glass door. A bell chimed overhead. The shopkeeper, a woman with silver hair and bright red glasses, greeted me warmly. "Looking for anything special?" "Yes," I said after a moment. "Something I don't need but want." She smiled knowingly and led me to a rack of scarves. Silk, soft as water, dyed in deep jewel tones. My hand lingered on one the color of midnight, with a scatter of silver threads. It reminded me of the night sky Tom and I used to watch from the porch. I bought it without hesitation. From there, I walked to the shoe store. My old pair was sturdy but heavy. I wanted something lighter. After trying on 3 pairs, I chose low-heeled leather flats, supple and comfortable. When I slipped them on, I felt years younger. Then I stopped at the bookstore. I let myself wander, touching spines, reading blurbs, stacking a pile that grew heavier and heavier in my arms, mysteries, memoirs, even a collection of poetry. I knew I might never finish, but wanted anyway. When the cashier rang up the total, I didn't flinch. I paid in cash and walked out smiling, the bag swinging at my side. At noon, I ducked into the little Italian cafe near the square. I ordered lasagna and a glass of red wine, alone at my own table, with no one hurrying me. I savored every bite. The waiter, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I'd like dessert. I almost said no. Habit. Then I heard my own voice say, "Yes, tiramisu." When it arrived, delicate and dusted with cocoa, I ate it slowly, deliberately, each spoonful like a declaration. I deserve this. By the time I walked home, the sun was dipping low. My arms were full. Books, shoes, the silk scarf folded neatly in its bag. Inside, I laid everything out on the couch and just looked at it. Not with guilt, not with second guessing, with quiet pride. This was mine. Paid for with money I'd earned, kept, and chosen to spend on myself. I slipped the scarf around my shoulders and stood in front of the mirror. The fabric shimmered in the light, transforming the tired woman I usually saw into someone almost regal. Someone who remembered she still had a self beyond being mother and grandmother. The phone buzzed on the table. Alex again. Then Joan. I ignored it. Instead, I brewed chamomile tea, pulled one of my new novels from the bag, and curled up in Tom's old armchair. The tulips on the mantel glowed in the lamplight. The house was silent except for the turning of pages. Later that evening, as I marked my place in the book, I opened my reckoning journal once more. On a fresh page I wrote, "New scarf, $60. Shoes, $85. Books, $112. Lasagna and wine, $24. Tiramisu, $9. Remembering my own worth, priceless." I set the pen down, leaned back, and let the quiet hold me. For the first time in decades, I had bought something simply because I wanted it. And it felt like the beginning of a whole new life. On Monday, Richard called just after breakfast. I had a slice of toast in my hand and the kettle still warming when the phone buzzed across the counter. "May," he said, skipping the pleasantries he usually kept. I've heard from your daughter. I figured you might, I said. She was animated. She demanded copies of everything you signed, claimed you were confused, and suggested the Foundation exerted undue influence. I told her we would not discuss your private decisions without your consent. I could hear paper shifting on his desk. Calm, careful movements. What happens next? I asked. Likely bluster first. Worst case, they try two routes: contesting after your death, or, sooner, a petition for guardianship alleging incapacity. He paused. You are not incapacitated. Still, I'd like you to visit your physician for a capacity letter. Clean, factual, dated. It closes doors before they open. I'll call Dr. Morales, I said. She still does mornings on Tuesdays. Good. And May. Document your independence. Keep receipts, notes, anything that shows you manage your own affairs. You already do. We'll simply make it visible. After we hung up, I stood a long while with my hands wrapped around an empty mug. I wasn't afraid. I was tired. There's a difference. I phoned Dr. Morales' office and asked for the earliest slot. The receptionist recognized my name and slipped me in for tomorrow at 9. Then I called the locksmith. The spare key Joan kept had become a habit no one challenged, the way a draft under a door goes unnoticed until winter. By noon, a young man in a van changed the deadbolts and handed me 2 bright new keys. I kept one on my ring and hid the other in Tom's old tackle box under the sink. I taped a small note inside the hall closet. New locks. March 12th. Not for anyone else. For me. That afternoon, a text from Alex arrived. We're filing if you don't come to your senses. This is elder abuse from that charity and that lawyer. We won't let them take you from us. I read it twice. The word abuse caught like a burr. I set the phone face down and wrote in my reckoning book. Abuse is forcing a mother to hand over her home with threats of silence. Protection is a lock that turns from the inside. The next morning, Dr. Morales had me sit by the window in her exam room. Simple questions, she said. Today's date? Where are we? Count backward by 7s. Draw a clock that shows 10 past 11. I did them all without hurry, and we both smiled at the clock I sketched, round and plain, like the one in my kitchen. You're oriented, organized, and stubborn in all the right ways, she said, typing. I'll write the letter. Do you want it sent to your attorney or to you? To me? I said. I'll carry my own spine. Back home, the mailman brought a thick envelope from the Foundation. Nothing dramatic, just a polite note from their counsel, thanking me for my trust and confirming their role if contacted by my family. Catherine's handwriting was on a sticky note. We're here. Quietly. I pressed the note inside my cookbook between the pages for lemon bars. By late afternoon, another call from Richard. I've received a message from counsel representing your children, he said. A very stern letter about reversing a harmful transfer. They hint at an emergency petition. Let them hint, I said. I have my doctor's letter. Good, he said, and I could hear relief soften his voice. I'll respond professionally. No arguments, only facts. I spent that evening assembling a red folder I labeled in thick black marker. May, autonomy. Inside, I placed the deed transfer receipt, the life estate clause, the bank's confirmations of revoked authorizations, Dr. Morales' letter, a list of my monthly bills with notes on how I pay each one, and a copy of my ID. I added a page titled Daily Routines, Grocery, Pills, Walks, the name of the young man who mows my lawn. It looked almost like homework. In a way, it was. Proof that my life still fit in my own hands. I also wrote 2 short letters, Both sent certified mail. The first to Joan. Please don't use a key to enter my home without asking. The locks have been changed. Call first. If I wish for company, I will say so. The second to Alex. Same words, same steady tone. No explanations, no barbs. Boundaries do not need adjectives. Catherine called just after sunset. I hope this isn't a bad time. It isn't, I said, watching light fade along the porch rail. Richard told me there may be noise. There may, she said. Our board is calm. If your children call us, we will be respectful and brief. We follow donors' wishes, nothing more. Thank you. I hesitated. I don't want to fight. I want an ending that has dignity. Sometimes dignity looks like paper, she said gently. Sometimes it looks like silence. We stayed a minute without talking, the kind of pause that feels like prayer. When we said goodbye, I stepped out onto the porch and breathed the cool night air. New locks behind me. Old stars above me. In the house across the street, Mrs. Evans's television flickered blue on her curtains. Ordinary life, ticking. Before bed, I called my neighbor Ruth. If anyone shows up in a temper, I said, would you mind being a witness to my calm? I'll bring cookies and a notebook, she said. You've carried people long enough. Let the paper carry you for once. I slept well. In the morning, I made oatmeal, tucked the red folder into the hall drawer where I keep stamps, and laid my new silk scarf across the back of Tom's chair. Then I sat at the table and wrote one last line in the reckoning book. Capacity affirmed. Locks changed. Boundaries mailed. Fear noted and set aside. The kettle whistled. I poured my tea and watched the steam rise until it disappeared. By Thursday, the tone had shifted. No more pleading, no more sweetened words. At 11 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier holding a thick envelope. Inside, a letter from an attorney representing Joan and Alex. The words were sharp, wrapped in legal formality. They questioned my capacity, claimed I had been influenced by outside parties, and warned of an impending petition for guardianship if I did not reconsider. Guardianship. I read the letter twice, then set it on the table beside my red folder. The audacity almost made me laugh. To think that children who hadn't bothered to bring me groceries in years now wanted control of my life. I brewed a pot of tea, took out my reckoning book, and wrote one line. They call it guardianship. I call it theft with paperwork. That afternoon, I walked to Richard's office with the letter in my handbag. He adjusted his glasses, read it quickly, and let out a dry chuckle. Empty threats, he said, but we'll take them seriously. I'll draft a response. Calm, professional, factual. Good, I said. No anger. Just truth. We sat together, reviewing the doctor's capacity letter, the notarized deed transfer, the bank confirmations. Each page was another brick in the wall I was building around my dignity. May, Richard said finally, looking at me over his glasses, this isn't really about the house anymore. It's about control. They're angry because they've lost it. I nodded. I know. When I left his office, I felt lighter. Not because the battle was won, but because I finally saw it for what it was, not a fight over property, but a fight for myself. That evening, the phone rang again. This time, I answered. Joan's voice was sharp. Mom, what have you done? Do you realize how humiliating this is? Lawyers, banks. You're making us look like fools. You did that yourselves, I said quietly. You're sick, she snapped. You can't even see how manipulated you are. That lawyer and that charity—" "They didn't put a pen in my hand," I interrupted. "I did." There was silence. Then her voice dropped, venomous. "Fine. If you want to cut yourself off, don't expect us at your funeral. Don't expect us to care when you're gone." I sat very still. "I don't expect anything anymore," I said, and hung up. The house was silent after that, but it didn't feel empty. It felt mine. The next morning, I walked into town and bought myself a slice of lemon cake from the bakery. I carried it home in a small white box, brewed tea, and set the cake on one of Tom's old dessert plates. As I ate, I thought of Joan's words: cruel, hasty, meant to wound. But they didn't. Not anymore. I had already stopped expecting. I finished the cake, wiped the crumbs neatly from the table, and opened my reckoning book once more. Legal threats. 1 envelope. Lawyer's reply. Pending. Fear. None. Then I underlined it twice. The house creaked as the wind shifted outside. I looked around the quiet kitchen, the tulips still blooming on the mantel, my new scarf draped across Tom's chair. It was enough. More than enough. They came on a gray afternoon together, as if unity could make them right. Joan rang the bell 3 times in quick little stabs. Alex stood behind her, jaw clenched. I had already set the kettle, already called Ruth from next door. When I opened the door, Ruth was at my shoulder with a spiral notebook and a pen. A witness, not a shield. "We need to talk," Joan said, pushing past me into the kitchen. She stopped when she saw Ruth. "What's she doing here?" "Taking notes," Ruth said, and sat quietly at the corner of the table. Alex put a folder down with a thud. "Mom, we're giving you one last chance to undo this. Sign our draft. Revoke whatever you filed. We won't ask again." I poured tea. No trembling. No apology. "Sit," I said. "Both of you." They sat. I placed the red folder in the center of the table and opened it like a book I knew by heart. This is my doctor's letter affirming capacity. This is the recorded deed with retained life estate. These are the bank confirmations revoking your authorizations. Here are my current bills and how I pay them. And this, I tapped the last page, is a list of boundaries. Call before visiting. No keys. No financial requests. If you file anything, this folder goes to the court first. Joan's cheeks blotched a hard pink. You let a charity manipulate you into giving away our family home. I shook my head. I gave away nothing. I kept my home for my lifetime. When I am gone, a shelter will have a house instead of a waiting list. This is cruel, she said, to your own children. What you asked of me at my own table was cruel, I said, calm as a stone. You brought the sentence. I chose the answer. Alex tried a softer voice. Mom, think about the grandchildren. I have, I said. They have parents with jobs. The women I've met have fear and a bag of clothes and maybe a baby on their hip. When you said for the family, you meant the circle you drew around yourselves. I widened it. Joan pointed at the folder. We can still fight this. You can try, I said. But what you will be fighting is my signature, my doctor's letter, the law, and my will. What you will be showing a judge is not love, but hunger. The only sound for a long moment was the kettle beginning to sing. I turned off the flame and poured. Alex stared into his cup. So that's it? You're choosing strangers over us? I am choosing dignity, I said. Yours, if you will accept it. Mine, whether you do or not. Joan stood. If you do this, we're done. Don't expect calls. Don't expect holidays. I expect nothing, I said, and it surprised me how light the words felt. Expectation is a rope you hand to someone else. I had finally taken mine back. Alex rose more slowly. He put a hand on the chair back, then let it fall. "Mom." He didn't finish. He followed his sister to the door. At the threshold, Joan turned. "You'll die alone in that house," she said, voice like ice. "I will die as I live today," I said, "on my own terms." They left. The door closed. Ruth wrote one last line and set down her pen. "You were clear," she said. "I was myself," I answered. We had tea at the quiet table. She didn't fill the silence with comfort. She didn't scold my children in my presence. She just sat with me while the house settled. When she rose to go, she squeezed my shoulder once and said, "Call if you want company. Don't if you don't." After she left, I washed the cups, dried them, placed them back on the shelf. I tucked the red folder into the hall drawer and slid it shut. The click sounded like a lock turning from the inside. In the evening, I walked to the foundation with a small envelope. Nothing grand, just enough to replace a broken crib and buy new smoke detectors. Catherine met me at the door. "May," she said softly. "I don't need thanks," I told her. "I need a favor. Anything we can do legally, we will." "When the time comes," I said. "Don't keep my name on anything. Call it Tom's house, if you must call it something. He always wanted a porch full of noise." Catherine smiled, eyes bright. "We'll make the porch strong." On my way home, the sky had cleared. The first star hung above the maple like a pin. The house looked small as I approached and exactly the right size when I stepped inside. I folded my new scarf over the back of Tom's chair and opened my reckoning book one last time. Children's threat. Returned to sender. Paperwork. Complete. Fear. Acknowledged, then dismissed. Self. Intact. I closed the book and put it away. Not on the shelf. In the drawer with the red folder. Some things you keep within reach. Before bed, I stood in the doorway and took in each room as if it were a face I loved. The wallpaper Tom and I had hung. The scuffed baseboard from when Alex learned to ride a scooter indoors. The sun-faded rug where Joan napped as a baby. Nothing in this house had changed today, and yet everything had. Here is the lesson I wish someone had handed me years ago. Love doesn't require surrender. Help is not a contract. Boundaries are not cruelty. If they threaten silence, let them be silent. Your life will make other sounds. If you're an old woman reading this with a knot in your chest, loosen it. Call your doctor. Call a lawyer. Change a lock. Cancel an automatic payment. Write your boundaries on paper and read them aloud to your own kitchen. And if you can, put one small thing back into the world where gratitude still lives. I turned off the lamp. The house exhaled. So did I.
Okay, hold up. Hold up. I just saw this title, Cat Williams on Don't Put Words Into My Mouth, I'm Not Anti-Immigrant, and I already know this is about to be some real talk. Because when Cat Williams has to come out and clarify his position on something, when he has to say don't put words into my mouth, that means somebody twisted what he said, took him out of context, or straight up lied about his stance. And Cat is not having it. This is classic Cat Williams energy right here. The man speaks his mind with zero filter, makes observations about society and culture that are complex and nuanced, and then people, especially media and social media, try to reduce his thoughts into sound bites that completely miss the point or intentionally misrepresent what he actually said. And then Cat has to come back and be like, yo, that's not what I said. Let me make this crystal clear. Let me start by saying, Cat Williams is one of the most intelligent comedians working today. People sleep on his intelligence because he's funny and animated and has this outrageous persona. But the man is sharp. He reads. He studies history. He understands economics and politics and social structures. When Cat talks about immigration or any social issue, he's coming from a place of actual knowledge, not just hot takes or talking points. So when the title says, "I'm not anti-immigrant," Cat is drawing a line. He's setting a boundary. He's saying, whatever you think I said about immigration, whatever clip you saw or headline you read, you need to understand my actual position, not the version that got twisted for clicks or controversy. This happens to Cat all the time. He'll make a nuanced point about a complex issue, and people will grab one sentence, strip away all the context, and present it as if that's his whole stance. That's intellectually dishonest. That's bad faith interpretation, and Cat is calling it out. Let me talk about what Cat has actually said about immigration in various interviews and bits, because context matters. Cat has talked about economic systems. He's talked about labor. He's talked about how corporations exploit immigrant workers. He's talked about how American foreign policy creates conditions that force people to migrate. These are complex observations about systems and structures, not attacks on immigrant people. But you know how the internet works. You know how media works. Someone can say something like, "We need to examine how corporate America uses immigrant labor to suppress wages for everyone," and it gets twisted into he's anti-immigrant. No, that's critiquing corporations and economic systems, not immigrants. But nuance dies in the age of soundbites and viral clips. The phrase, "Don't put words into my mouth," is so important because it's about agency over your own narrative. It's about refusing to let other people define what you believe. It's about demanding that if you're going to be criticized or praised, it should be for what you actually said, not for some distorted version someone created. Cat probably said something that could be interpreted multiple ways, depending on your perspective and agenda. Maybe he criticized immigration policy without criticizing immigrants themselves. Maybe he pointed out economic realities without blaming immigrant workers for those realities. Maybe he discussed cultural change without saying that change is inherently bad. These are all distinctions that matter tremendously, but get lost when people are looking for controversy. Let me give you an example of how this works. Imagine Cat says something like, "We got people in this country who've been here for generations, still struggling, still can't get jobs that pay living wages, and then corporations bring in workers from other countries and pay them even less. And everybody's struggling, except the people at the top, who are profiting off everybody's desperation." That's a critique of capitalism and corporate exploitation. That's pointing out how the wealthy pit workers against each other. That's an economic analysis. But someone could clip just the middle part and make it sound like he's blaming immigrants for taking jobs, when the actual target of his criticism is the corporations doing the exploiting. That's what "Don't put words into my mouth" is fighting against. It's fighting against deliberate misrepresentation. It's fighting against people who either don't understand nuance or don't care about nuance, because controversy drives engagement. Now, the fact that Cat has to explicitly say, "I'm not anti-immigrant," tells me he's probably been accused of being anti-immigrant, maybe by media outlets, maybe on social media, maybe by people who disagreed with whatever point he was making. And those accusations probably gained enough traction that Cat felt the need to directly address them. And good for him. Good for anyone who stands up and says, "No, you're misrepresenting me. Let me clarify my actual position." That's taking control of your narrative. That's refusing to be defined by your critics' bad faith interpretations. Let me talk about Cat's credibility on issues of social justice and community, because it's relevant. Cat has been consistent over his career about caring about working people, about black communities, about systemic inequities. He's not coming from a place of bigotry or xenophobia. He's coming from a place of analyzing power structures and who benefits from various social arrangements. So when Cat talks about immigration, he's probably talking about it the way he talks about everything. Examining who has power, who's being exploited, how systems work, where the money goes. That's not anti-immigrant. That's anti-exploitation. But those get conflated by people who either don't understand the difference or are deliberately trying to mischaracterize his position. I'm also thinking about the timing of this. When did Cat have to make this clarification? What was the context? Was it in response to a specific interview or clip that went viral? Was it because he's been getting pushback on social media? Was it during a time when immigration is particularly contentious in political discourse? The timing matters because it affects how the message lands and why it was necessary. If this is recent and immigration is a hot-button issue politically, then Cat's clarification becomes part of a larger national conversation. If it's older, it might be addressing a specific incident where he was misquoted or taken out of context. Let me talk about the comedy aspect, because Cat is a comedian. Comedy involves exaggeration, hypotheticals, provocative statements designed to make people think or laugh. When comedians talk about social issues in their acts, they're not writing policy papers or academic treatises. They're performing. They're using humor and rhetoric to make points. But people increasingly treat comedians' bits as if they're political manifestos. They analyze every word as if it's a formal statement of belief, rather than part of a performance designed to entertain and provoke thought. That's often unfair to comedians who are using humor as a tool to explore ideas, not making pronouncements about what they literally believe in every particular. So if Cat said something about immigration in a comedy bit, it needs to be understood in context as comedy. Maybe he was being satirical. Maybe he was playing devil's advocate. Maybe he was exaggerating to make a point. Comedy allows for that kind of exploration. But when clips get shared without context, people treat it as if he was giving a TED Talk. Now, Cat saying "I'm not anti-immigrant" is a defensive position, which is interesting. He's having to defend himself against accusations. He's having to clarify rather than just speak freely. That's the unfortunate reality of public discourse in 2024, 2025. You can't just make complex observations about the world without immediately being labeled and categorized and attacked. But Cat being Cat, he's probably not just defending himself. He's probably going on offense, too. He's probably explaining in detail what his actual views are, what he was actually trying to say, why people who accused him of being anti-immigrant are wrong, and what the real issues are that he was trying to address. That's what makes Cat different from a lot of public figures who just issue bland apologies or non-apology apologies when accused of something. Cat engages. He explains. He doubles down on his actual points, while clarifying where he was misunderstood. He educates while defending himself. Let me consider what Cat's actual stance on immigration probably is, based on his general worldview and approach to social issues. He probably believes Immigrants are human beings, deserving of dignity and respect. People migrate because of economic necessity, and often because of conditions created by U.S. foreign policy. The immigration debate is often manipulated by wealthy interests to distract from class issues. Borders and immigration policy serve the interests of capital more than working people. Immigrant workers are exploited by employers who use their vulnerable status. Working-class people of all backgrounds have more in common with each other than with the wealthy elite. The focus should be on systems and structures, not on scapegoating immigrants. These are progressive, humane positions that recognize the complexity of immigration as an issue. They're not anti-immigrant. They're anti-exploitation, anti-capitalist in some senses, pro-worker solidarity. But if you take one statement from that worldview out of context, you could make it sound different. If you ignore the system's analysis and just focus on a statement about labor markets, you could twist it. That's what Kat is fighting against with this clarification. I'm also thinking about how this relates to Kat's overall relationship with controversy. The man is no stranger to controversy. He says what he thinks. He doesn't apologize for his perspectives. He's been fired from shows. He's had conflicts with other entertainers. He's been arrested. He's had public struggles. But through it all, he's maintained his authenticity. So when Kat says, "Don't put words into my mouth," that's consistent with his character. He's always been about speaking his truth, not letting others define him. He's always pushed back against narratives he doesn't agree with. He's always insisted on his right to his own perspective. This clarification about immigration is part of that pattern. It's Kat refusing to be boxed in by other people's labels or accusations. It's him asserting control over his own message. It's him saying, "If you're going to criticize me, criticize what I actually believe, not what you think I believe or what's convenient for you to claim I believe." Let me address the broader issue of how public figures get misrepresented in our current media environment, because it's relevant. Clips get shared without context. Headlines distort actual content. Social media amplifies the most controversial interpretation. A line is impossible in 280 characters or 30-second clips. People don't read the full source material. Accusations spread faster than corrections. Emotional reactions override factual analysis. This creates an environment where someone like Kat can say something complex and nuanced, and within hours, there are thousands of people who know he said something offensive, even though they never actually listened to what he said in full. Context. That's what he's fighting against. That's why clarifications like this are necessary. Because once a narrative takes hold, Kat Williams is anti-immigrant. It's hard to correct even when it's false. The correction doesn't spread as widely as the original accusation. Now, I'm curious about the reception of this clarification. How are people responding? Are the people who accused him of being anti-immigrant accepting his clarification? Or are they doubling down, claiming he's backtracking or lying about his real beliefs? Are his fans supporting him? Are new people learning about the fuller context of what he actually said? The reception tells us a lot about whether we're capable of having good faith conversations about complex issues, or whether we're stuck in a mode where everyone's trying to score points and nobody's actually listening to each other. I want to hear Kat explain his position in his own words. I want to hear him break down what he actually believes about immigration, what he was trying to say that got misinterpreted, and why the people accusing him of being anti-immigrant are wrong. Because when Kat explains something, He does it with clarity, with humor, with references to history and economics and social structures. He educates while he clarifies. And I think there's a broader lesson here about how we engage with public figures and their statements. We need to seek out full context before forming opinions. Distinguish between criticism of systems and criticism of people. Recognize that complex issues don't reduce to simple labels. Give people opportunity to clarify before assuming the worst. Engage with actual arguments rather than straw-man versions. Recognize that disagreement doesn't equal bigotry. If we did those things, public discourse would be so much more productive. We'd have actual conversations instead of just people yelling past each other. We'd learn from different perspectives instead of just trying to cancel everyone who says something we initially find objectionable. All right, I'm ready to hear Kat break this down. I'm ready for him to explain exactly what he meant, why he's not anti-immigrant, what the real issues are that he's trying to address, and why people need to stop putting words in his mouth. Because when Cat Williams gets on a topic like this, when he's defending his position and educating at the same time, that's when he's at his best. Let's hear the clarification. Let's get the full story. Let's understand what Cat Williams actually believes about immigration, not what people claim he believes.